What prompted you to make this Instagram post in the first place?
I knew that I'd been working on a workshop called Love and Trauma, the Trans Experience, that was going to be in association with the Trans Visibility March on DC. And I was trying to get some attention. And so I intentionally, well, actually, the order of events was I saw a video of a young man, which many people saw, Maurice Willoughby. And I knew the backstory, that he was a young man who was dating a transgender woman. I knew that he had some drug abuse issues. I knew he had some abuse issues with the girlfriend. But in the video, you see him be bullied, and it had circulated, and people thought that this kid, committed suicide because he was being bullied, directly related to his dating a trans woman. So that was part of the story. The other part of the story for me was when I saw that kid in the video, I thought of myself. At that age, I was someone who was also curious about what's going on with transgender people, women in specifically. And so I thought that I would post a video and make a comment around why is it that it's okay for us to record bullying each other? Why is it okay for us to disregard each other because of our choices? And I thought that I should make a comment about it. And I know that a lot of this conversation about black men and trans women also sort of extends into who is murdering these people, right? So over the years, I've posted about these things. Transgender women being murdered. I know it's black men. I know that black men aren't being accountable for each other. And I thought that I would take a calculated risk of putting my masculinity in question. I would put my intention in question. I would disrupt the status quo by saying, I'm gonna stand with this kid, I'm gonna stand with this community. I'm gonna say that it is true that I, as well, are one of these men that have been attracted to transgender women. And I've struggled with that, and I've tried to figure out what does that mean, and why, and I'm 52 years old. This started when I was a teenager. So for me, it's been a lifelong question of like, where does this exist in my consciousness, in a practice or whatever. And so for me, I wanted to put the video up, bring attention to the bullying, to the ostracizing of each other, and bring attention to the march and to a workshop where we can unpack a lot of this stuff.
So you talk a lot about stepping up as opposed to coming out. Mm-hmm. Can you tell me what stepping up exactly means and what does that look like?
Well, for me, as a kid, my father always said, if there's a crack, fill it, right? And so I grew up with the understanding that you take care of folk. I grew up in a household where there was a man in the building who had done 8 years in prison for being accused of rape, and my father took care of those 3 kids. One day I came home from school and there's 2 7 and 8 year olds in our house because their mother had a psychotic break, and my father took care of those kids. And so I grew up with an understanding that you take care of community, you take care of people that are less fortunate than you, you uplift others, that's how you create community. If you are blessed, then you be a blessing to other people. And so for me, stepping up is about, looking at the lens of this conversation of the transgender community. Someone who grew up in New York City, someone who went to school with transgender kids. We're right here in Times Square. And so, I went to school not far from here. There were transgender kids at school, particularly coming up in the performing arts. There were kids who we would call now fluid that were trying to figure it out. I went to school with Octavia St. Laurent, who was in the movie Paris is Burning before she transitioned. So my experience with the transgender community goes back for decades. And so someone who has seen people suffer, people who can't get jobs because of their gender identity or get kicked out of the home and they're homeless or drug addicted as a result of that, and then, or they're on the street selling themselves and then they get arrested, then they have a record, and that cycle of abuse, for me, I knew that if a black man like myself that has represented intentionally and authentically, and we'll get back to the authentic part, but authentically, I know that my presence in the culture has meant many things. I know that when I arrived on the scene as a cop, that influenced people, that influenced fathers, right? I was a young father on a television show. So I know the history of who I've represented in the culture. And I know that it takes someone like myself to stand up and make some noise about an issue that no one is actually paying attention to. And so stepping up for me was, taking a stance and just saying, I'm here, I'm here to represent you. I'm here to fight with you. To open up the aperture so people can see your humanity. I'm a storyteller. I know that I have things in the pipeline I've been trying to do for years. Octavia, for folks who don't know, do yourself a favor, watch the movie Paris is Burning, and you'll meet my former classmate, but who's no longer with us. And it's been a desire of mine for a long time to stand with the community and tell these stories because they're fascinating stories. They're fascinating individuals that I know, both trans men and trans women. Now there's more transgender kids I've had an opportunity to meet and their parents, and I just feel like it's a community that's been shitted on. And I'm glad that I put something out into the world where it's not a movie, it's not a TV show, but I said something as Malik Yoba that shook the world. Literally, I've gotten communication from people all over the planet. And that's powerful. That's powerful. Even though there's like nonsense and noise that came with it and a lot of confusion that came with it, I just know what my purpose is. And my purpose has always been to service before self, always. And so that's essentially
so I definitely want to kind of get into some of those themes, right? So since creating these posts, you received a mixture of support and criticism. On a more serious note, a trans woman by the name of Mariah Lopez Ebony wrote a Facebook post in which she accused you of soliciting sex from her as a minor at ages 13 and 16 years old. So what do you say to that allegation?
I say that, when I heard that, and I didn't actually read it until last Thursday, what she actually said. I don't know the woman, number one.
So you're saying you never met her, you don't know her?
That's exactly what I'm saying. I don't know her. I have no idea who she is. But I'm familiar with that pain. I'm familiar with that trauma. I'm familiar with people who are crying out for help. I'm familiar with the lack of regard for this population, which is, again, my point. And so when I heard it, for me, to hear something so heinous, right, number one, and then to see someone post something with no proof of anything, and then to see the world embrace, or a portion of the world embrace it and pass that around, that toxicity speaks to exactly why I do the work that I do, right? And so it's an oxymoron almost. It's like, wow, the first cisgender man who stands up with a community then gets attacked by that community. But that's true for anybody who's ever stood up for oppressed people. It's happened to Gandhi, and it's happened to Mandela. It's happened to Marcus Garvey. It's happened to Malcolm X. It's happened to anyone who would say, I'm going to stand up for these oppressed people. Think about who we are, right? There was a time we couldn't drink from a water fountain. We couldn't sit in the bus. Think about how ridiculous that is. And so for me, having a view of a community that I grew up with and see the suffering, the very thing that motivates me to help people out of is something that someone tried to accuse me of.
I wanted to ask you.
I want to finish the point. So the point is, to be on the other side of that tells me that the work has to continue and the blessing will be greater because the truth will always outweigh a lie, right? And so the truth is people are suffering. The truth is that there are kids in the street, right? But the other truth is that for my entire life, I'm someone who has been working with young people since I was 16 years old, making sure that there are better pathways for other people. And so that's a very loaded question for you to ask me that, and we discussed that before.
And I actually told you that I would ask you that question. And so I asked that question.
Yeah,
and it's not a loaded question. I told you
No,
I
it
was
is.
going to tell you up front
It is.
that I did tell you about it.
Yeah.
And we both agreed to it.
Yeah.
I told you that.
But it's still, but see, even we sat for 4 hours the other day, right, and discussed this. And so even when you ask me in real time to even the suggestion of it, right, because there's so many implications in that, right? There's legal.
And I had another
there's-
follow-up point
Yeah.
to that since you added on. What would you say to people who feel that even in this allegation, you are centering yourself in regards to being someone who stands up for a community? I think that's the way that a lot of people would perceive that, bringing up the famous people who have done great things in civil rights, and you centering yourself in the middle of an allegation.
Yeah, you know, this is a bullet wound, right? We're on 45th Street in Broadway. I got shot 5 blocks from here at the age of 15, right? So a quarter of an inch over, I would have been paralyzed from the neck down, a half inch over, I'd be dead. So since January 18th, 1983, I've never taken a second for granted to be alive. I'm very, you know, I can't even count how many people are no longer here that I grew up with, that I've known. That number's, I don't even know how many it is, right? And so life is precious, and each moment is precious. And so for someone who has long understood the power of thought and the power of intention, the ability to manifest my life the way I've wanted to. I've never had a job that I didn't want. I've never had to just work to make money. Every single thing I've done in my life, whether I was a bike messenger, you know, working with young people, making movies, TV, working in education, working with the criminal justice system, working on the environment, working with fathers, any social issue, any professional pursuit, every single thing I've done, it's because it's an intention. And I follow the intention, I chase the purpose, right? And so to stand up in the face of someone saying that you're this, when I know I'm this, I also felt, wow, that's kind of how it feels like to be transgender, right? Can you imagine walking into the world, looking the way you and I do, but feeling inside that something is not lining up, and you need to address that with the way you present in the world, and you don't look so good?
I don't think I could ever, or anybody who's cisgender could ever place themselves in a trans person's position.
I think we can, because I had to do it on New York Undercover. So on New York Undercover, we did an episode where people were killing transgender people. So we actually had to dress and go into the world.
That's fiction, though. That's not real
No,
life.
but you're missing my point. You're making your point. The point that I'm making is that you asked me, what does it feel like to stand up in the face of this? And I'm telling you that if I'm this, and someone's calling me this, that is akin to a transgender woman being called a man.
Do you really make that comparison?
I do. You may not make it, but I'm making the comparison because I sat in it. I know what it's like for people to try to yell at me and tell me I'm gay, to tell me that I'm a pedophile, to tell me what I'm not. And I have to stand up to that. And the only thing that I can do is stand up with the truth. And so when you feel that pain, when you walk down the street and people are basically saying, fuck you, and you still move on your purpose, that's empowering. As painful as it is, it's also empowering. And so when I talk to my transgender friends, and they have people tell them what they're not, when they're telling you that they are, that's painful for them too. So if I'm gonna be the person, the first one, to stand up and take the hits, I know what it feels like. And I feel I have the right to say, yes, as I stand alongside you, I do understand your pain, not on an intellectual level, but on an experiential level. I was walking down the street the other day and someone said, happy birthday, AIDS victim. They screamed that out a window to me. I lost work because of this, just like trans people. I have people look at me sideways, just like trans people. I have people calling me gay, just like trans people. So I have the right to tell you exactly how it feels if I choose to stand up with these folks that I love and appreciate and consider part of my humanity.
Okay.
And I can tell you what it feels like.
I understand. So moving forward with this, to kind of rally out, fill out the rest of these questions before we move forward. since this allegation, too, if you search your name on social media, some sex workers have come forward saying that you've long solicited sex from trans women, and because of this, you've been criticizing for fetishizing trans women and not having intimate and loving relationships with them. So what would you say to that?
I don't know what you're talking about.
So we've gone on social media and we found people who have said this, and so
social media now is the truth. That's the
people who have
repository.
faces,
Yeah.
their faces on it. So we were just asking if you had anything to say about that. Okay, so going on to, what do you say to trans black women who say that you're centering yourself and that you're being opportunistic and focusing on your attraction as opposed to their issues, and without proving that you're ready to do the work? So what would you say to that?
So you and I sat for 4 hours the other day,
Correct?
and we decided how we were going to approach this.
Not,
And
we went through a,
we
through a
decided
number
how
of
we were going to approach
questions.
this, bro.
We went through a number of questions.
We decided how we were going to approach this.
And
we
we're
said
actually
that
recording, and the more you talk, the better, the worse it looks for you. So what I'm asking is that we're having a
What
conversation.
did you say?
I said the more that we're talking, the more I'm just concerned. So I'm generally
you just
concerned.
say?
I said that the more that it looks bad for you. That's
Really?
what I'm saying. Yes, sir.
This looks bad for me.
Yes, because
Check
I'm
this
asking you
out.
a number
No,
of questions.
We're done, bro.
Okay.
We're done. It looks bad for me because I chose to come here and speak to you about what you do and what I've done. It looks bad for me. It's a setup. I don't like this.
Okay.
We said that we were going to focus on policy.
And we
said
did, and we
said
also,
we're
and we
gonna focus on
also,
community,
and we
you
also
stand on
said,
allegations,
and
homie.
we
I
also
don't appreciate
said,
this at all.
and no, we had a conversation
I
about a
don't
wide
appreciate
range
this
of
shit
things.
at all, homie.
Questions did feel like they,
I don't. This is not what we
They're
fucking
not
discussed for
gonna
4 fucking hours. You
They're
understand
not-
allegations, homie?
Okay.
The fuck is wrong with you?
It's starting to just.
The fuck is wrong with you?
There
We
are.
sat for 4
Yeah,
fucking
we
hours.
did
We
sit-
sat
Okay,
for 4
okay,
fucking
okay,
hours.
We
okay,
did
okay,
sit for
okay.
hours.
Yeah, we passed it.
We sat for 4
Okay.
fucking hours. And you gonna stand some fucking allegations? Fuck you. The fuck is wrong with you? This is my fucking life. The fuck is wrong with you? Yo.
I have your stuff. Can you guys not? This is like.
That's fucked up, man.
True.
We have-
like.
The fuck is wrong with you, man? We fucking sat for 4 hours.
All right, bro.
Don't tell me shit.
Let's keep it professional.
Don't tell me about this. This isn't professional. This is life.
His intention is not to antagonize you. We're trying to.
No, we discussed the process. We said we would start.
Let's bring it
No,
down.
no.
We can talk about it. Let's bring it.
No,
down.
my
Let's
man.
bring it down. Just so we had an office setting, nobody's here to argue
Listen.
or argue with you. Express
No, no, no.
yourself, but let's keep it professional.
Listen, you're not the one being
I
called
understand,
names in the
brother,
street.
But he's not trying to call you.
We're not-
names.
We
He's trying to
discussed
conversation.
how we would flow. We said we would start with policy. We said we would talk about community, and then we said we would talk about our personal lives. We said we would do 20 minutes, 20 minutes, 20 minutes. You stayed on the allegations, B. I want the cards. You can't use any
Okay.
of it. There's no release your signs. I want the fucking cards out of all these cameras.
We can't
You
give
can't
you our
use it without the
cards.
release.
You're giving life to a lie, homie.